interview with me, Makhanya, and I'm here to interview Mr. Vaneshran. This 22 years esebenza in the industry, so I'm here to find out a little bit more about himself. So let's go.
You have a responsibility kind of thing. You have to, you can't just throw away your life. And I mean, if you go deep into some of the ancient philosophies around art, they are very similar to the ancient philosophies around life, around living.
Office lakhe ngase usabhizi ubaba Vaneshran, so sizomlinda kancane aqede ukuba busy, then we'll go and interview.
I feel like those things are not so separate from each other.
Would you please tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you for the opportunity. I've been a professional performing artist for the last 22 years or so, mainly on screen and stage, but also writing and producing. It's also brought me to the academy and to teaching. I've been very lucky to travel around the world, to perform with many of our current South African artists of stature. But I've also had the opportunity to work with people from different cultures and teach some of our South African stories abroad, such as in Europe and in America. I traveled to India in the early 90s, mid-90s, with the South African play. So it's been 22 years of exploring storytelling in different media, in different forms, being able to work as a writer, being able to work as an actor, being able to work as a producer, and really to exercise collaboration between the different formats, music, as I say, writing, but also physical dance. I've had the pleasure of directing and choreographing it for dance festivals. So mine has been a career of trying to put together as many different things as possible in the service of telling stories.
Have you ever faced any challenges, maybe?
Of course. Of course.
How do you manage to overcome them?
Well, I mean, you must understand that I started my approach to becoming an artist was in a time when it wasn't seen as maybe the most viable career choice for someone of color. And as things go, the darker you are, the more difficult things can be. So, coming up in the early 90s in Johannesburg, that's where I did my undergraduate degree and started working professionally. There was very little for actors of color, but in particular Indian actors, there was hardly anything. And you're probably too young to remember, but TV at the time, I think the only Indian on screen was reading the news. There wasn't such a thing as Indian characters, you know. It was a very rare thing to see. Never mind black characters being stereotyped and having very little functions in stories on screen or in theatre. They generally had a certain function, be the black guy, be the stereotype, and those were the parts that I was encountering. And at the same time fighting for those bigger parts, fighting for those classical parts that are generally portrayed by white actors, and seeing my peers getting all the cool parts. It was certainly part of my waking up, is to fight for those parts, to fight to be seen as an equal artist, to fight to be seen as someone who can contribute to this idea of worthwhile storytelling and valuable techniques, you know, that are not necessarily Western or European, you know, that we have our own traditions here in Africa, and that my own African tradition is also steeped in an Indian tradition, and then that has also kind of changed with being here in Africa for 5 generations and mixed up with, you know, it's its own thing. Yes. And within that there's so much that we have to offer, which is hardly been tapped, even to this day, 2018. From the beginning of my career to today, while a lot has happened, surely, I don't want to sound, what do you call it, pessimistic or negative. A lot has happened, but at the same time, very little has changed. It's a conundrum.
As an Indian practitioner in the industry, how has that influenced your work?
Well, yeah, that's a difficult question, because I never put that label on myself of being an Indian practitioner, and certainly my own work starts to touch on the Indian experience. It's not deeply sort of exploring the Indianness. It's much more just looking at the experience of being me as I am in South Africa. So I have a far more African identity when I look at myself from my experience than an Indian one. So, and that's been part of the confusion, not just for me, but like quite a few generations of my people. But as an artist, it's been confusing, because one is trying to tell one's own story, but then what is one's story when it's so buried in history by, you know, the vicissitudes of fate. This is what these people say is your people and your people's history, and this is what these people say is your people and your people's history, and yet here am I in this place, and this is what I'm learning as my history. So it's a tough question, but being Indian has always been sort of a present. There's always been it's always given me an access to that sort of Eastern way of looking at things, that there's an ancient root. I don't know, there's been that side to it.
In every society, basically, it's mostly all about black against the white people. So do you perhaps think that there are some other doors that may be opened in the entertainment industry for the Indian people, or perhaps the Indian people in South Africa?
Sure, that is a complicated question. As artists, we have a responsibility to change that way of looking at reality. trying to identify ourselves.
Stereotypes.
Yeah, trying to belong to a grouping and whatever. As artists, we, no matter which race or culture or language group we come from, we have a responsibility to create community, you know? When we tell stories, we want the audience to understand, to share something, right? So then that, by definition, creates a community out of them, even if it's just for the duration of the show.
So what I'm getting here is you not collaborating yourself with a community that is somehow different from other communities or races perhaps. So do you maybe think that for the black society there are still some opportunities that can be achieved?
Well, look, the reality we live in has a history that we can agree upon and that we can debate about, but it has happened, and we need to confront it and own it and challenge it also, and especially challenge perspectives on history, because as you know, they're not always the only perspective, the ones that we are given. Like our history books used to say that South Africa was discovered in 1652, but it was here before then. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yes, there is a history, and yes, we have a responsibility to kind of confront it and deal with it, but as artists, we must be clear what we want to get out of that. Is it about security for my identity, or is it about exploding those identities so that we can have the security of the community? That is what I think is the real mission of the artist, is the dissolution of these ideas of how separate we are, because those things dissolve. They dissolve when the really meaningful things in life happen, which artists, by the way, are the ones who are good at reflecting those meaningful things. Nothing is quite as immediate as theatre. It feels like all the processes happen in one moment. The watching, the creating, everything comes together to one moment, where with film, it appears to happen in one moment, but actually there's so many other things that are necessary, and so many, it happens over such a long time that the
I thought art was more like collaborated with science. But is it not? Does it not have to do with science? Because the more science grows, the more art grows.
So, yeah, that's another very interesting question. And the way I see things is that there's not really a difference between what is art and what is science. The difference is, like what I said earlier, art is that which exists. Science, for me, is what we understand about that which exists. You understand?
Yeah, and
So art is what's there. Science is what we can know about
to be
it,
found,
or what we can know about what is there. So it might be a pen, and that's a creative, artistic thing that has come out of someone's mind, right? They thought about it, or not even one person, many minds came about through generations to come up with this thing, right?
Yeah.
And that is the art.
So, seeing your profile online, I've seen that you've worked and you've traveled a lot around the world. So, with those with those works that you've done, which of them would you consider as the greatest achievement of your time?
Well, I haven't traveled enough, and there are a lot of more people that I would like to work with. But I feel I've been very blessed in being able to play those classical parts like Hamlet, and I think it still remains one of the great acting experiences. Our director was at that point was, I think she was 68, 60 something, late 60s, with a lot of experience, and to work with someone like that on such a part with a great cast, there was so much energy and insight that went into the production, and then to be able to take the production to England and show them that as Africans we know something about Shakespeare that they can't know, because we did a Hamlet that was set in South Africa that talked about apartheid. We did a Hamlet that talked about Robben Island without changing the script. But you can't be an Englishman and do that. You have to be a South African. You understand? So for me, that was powerful. And I feel like it's a powerful thing that as Africans and as South Africans, we still need to do more of that. We need to be taking these stories. Take the Hamlets. They've taken our stories. It doesn't matter who's the, but what I'm saying, as Africans, we don't enough just let our stories come out, and take what we want to be able to tell the stories we need to tell. Why can't we be Hamlet? Why can't we be ancient Greeks, or you know what I mean? Why can't our stories from today be told in a way that it can apply in Oslo or China, for that matter? Why can't they know about Fezile and whoever, but we must know about John Wick,
we know
and
about
we must know about
we know about
that.
Sophocles and
but I mean, even to like contemporary, we know about The Equalizer, and we know about do you know what I mean? These characters that are so Triple X, whoever, do you know what I mean?